Welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast, the show where we help you optimize your health, fitness, and mindset on a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. My name is Maxime. I am a former triathlete, powerlifter, bodybuilder, and basketball player, and I've been vegan for over 9 years. I'm also the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, which has helped over 500 vegans from 20 different countries to completely transform their bodies and their health. I'm excited for you to hear today's episode. Let's get into the show. All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, I am joined by Ella Majors, an animal lover since birth and dedicated vegan since the age of 15. Ella is on a mission to transform the health and wellness industry from the inside out. She's the founder of Sexy Fit Vegan. She's built an audience that's 60K strong and that stretches across the globe. Her work as a speaker, author, podcast host, which I've been on, and coach gives people the tools they need to heal and empower themselves in a world that challenges them at every turn. Ella, how are you doing today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
Good. I'm really happy that you got to jump on my show.
Me too. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. And so for the people listening, Robert Cheek, really good friend, common friend of ours, put us in contact. She had the opportunity to record together, and Ella has an amazing story and a lot of great knowledge when it comes to helping people transform and live their best lives. So that's always excited to bring you on board today. So we'd love to talk about your journey to veganism, because you started at 15. So it was way before it was cool, right? So what brought you to want to turn vegan at 15?
Yeah, well, it actually started when I was 7, when I got out of school. I was in first grade, got in the car, I was headed off to gymnastics practice with my mom, and she asked me how my day was. And I said, well, Mom, we learned about this guy named Daniel Boone. And for anyone who might not know who Daniel Boone is, he's one of our first American folk heroes. And he wore a raccoon hat and he carried around a shotgun. And I said, Mom, this guy was supposed to be a hero, but he was so mean. He shot animals and he ate them. Mm-hmm. And my mom was honest with me, and she said, well, Ella, we're just very fortunate these days. We get to buy our meat at the grocery store. We don't have to do that ourselves anymore. And it was at that moment that I connected what chicken was, that it was an actual chicken, like the animal chicken,
Yeah.
And that light bulb went off for me, and I was horrified. And I said, well, Mom, right then and there, I said, Mom, I'm never doing that again. I'm never eating animals again. And sure enough, I never ate animals again. And so that started my journey toward veganism. I became a vegetarian on that day. My parents thought it would be a phase.
Yeah, they always think it is.
Right. Yeah, that's just, a phase. I'll get over it. But there was no getting over it. And they realized very quickly that this was something I felt very connected to, that it was part of kind of who I was. And so they supported me in it after some time. And, it's funny. I just turned 43. And so that was 1987. And that was way before, phones and internet. And somehow I got the information I needed between the age of 7 and 15 to really understand the whole industry, from not only the meat, but also dairy and eggs, and how they're all connected and the cruelty involved in all of them. And I had, vegan outreach and PETA sending me leaflets and pamphlets. And I was leading campaigns in my middle school and high school. And so yeah, by the time I was 15, I understood the industries enough to know what it meant to be vegan, and that was definitely what was in alignment with who I was and what I believed in. And at that moment, I thought that if only everybody knew what was happening behind the closed doors of factory farms, that surely they would turn vegan just like me.
Yeah, it's such an interesting part. Realizing that a chicken is the chicken on your plate. Right. It's crazy how there's even still adults to this day, there's not the connection between the two of them. It's just this thing that I buy at the grocery store versus, like, if you could grab a chicken, kill it, remove the meat, and put it on a plate in front of somebody, I think they have a very different experience of the food that they're consuming.
Absolutely. We are so disconnected and so programmed to be disconnected.
Yeah. And so what led you to turn from, we all have a little activist kind of phase when we transition at first, like, I gotta save the world, I gotta save the animals, and we go really intense. So what got you from transitioning to veganism at 15 to now being and starting Sexy Fit Vegan? So going into kind of like the fitness realm.
Yeah. So for me, it's always been about my how. I knew from that young age that really my life's work and the mission that I was on personally in this world was to reduce the suffering of animals. I've also always been into fitness since I was 5. I was competitive gymnastics and into swimming and dance and taekwondo and volleyball. And, I've always been into sports. So during my teenage years, I did go that route of let me educate through pamphlets and leaflets and sitting in cages on the side of the road, demonstrating what animals are going through in laboratories and in factory farms. And, it was a tough pill to swallow when I realized that a lot of people weren't ready to make that connection. They didn't want to know because it would mean they need to change, and change is very uncomfortable. So my whole life has been about what's my how can I use my talents, my skills, who I am to help reduce the suffering of animals. And when I realized the direct action, maybe that wasn't the best route. After college, I jumped into the fitness industry as part of my career path, and realized very quickly that by having a very strong, lean physique, that people were really interested. And so now they weren't running from me; they were coming towards me and saying, "Wow, how do you build muscle like that? How do you stay so lean? How are you so strong?" And by becoming a personal trainer, it was this great way to attract people to ask me how I was doing it. And they were much more open just through me living by example and me being this shining light of what's possible on a plant-based diet. And so that was my how for many years, was just through personal training, through inspiring people, through helping people with their diet and nutrition, with their goals of physical health. And I say health, but I learned very quickly also that the fitness industry, especially back then, had very little to do with health. Right.
Yeah.
It was
It's
more about
still right now.
Still. And well, I feel like, and tell me because I feel like I'm in this bubble, half the time, but the fitness industry might be the slowest of everything to come around when it comes to promoting plant-based or making that change, or starting to at least accept that it's possible. So many, the percentage of trainers out there that say, no, you can't do that and reach your goal is still really high. Is that just me, or is that what you think as
no,
well?
I agree with you. I also agree with you that we're also in a bubble. So to me, I was like, people think this way because all of our friends are kind of vegan and into fitness. But yeah, definitely stepping outside the bubble, there's still that really hardcore belief that they'll tell you at least eat eggs, at least grab whey protein,
Right.
at least eat fish. But also a lot of that, I think, has to do with the certifications that trainers get, right? Because a lot of it, they'll always give you a little nutritional component of it, and like protein, chicken, steak, eggs are the thing that's needed if you want to help your clients get success. So I think it gets reinforced before they get into this new job too.
Yes. And then they find what works for them, at least in terms of what's building them muscle. And they know that, yes, you can do that with chicken and steak and broccoli. Broccoli, I just say that because that bodybuilder diet of like standard, chicken and broccoli is like chicken, rice,
broccoli, rice, and hot sauce or mustard.
Yes.
Yeah.
And whey protein, like pudding.
Yes.
That's on the list.
A sludge. You ever
a
made those?
Sludge. Oh yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah. Not with whey protein, since I've been vegan since 15, but I did my vegan versions along the way. And so I forgot the question now.
Oh, no, of like what brought you to build Sexy Fit Vegan?
Yeah, so it was 2013 when, and I knew personal training wasn't my career path. I knew it was part of it, but my heart, what I'm really passionate about is veganism, is plant-based living, is living with compassion. And I just didn't feel like in the years leading up to that I really knew how to, or didn't think maybe the market was out there yet. 2013 felt like a bit of a tipping point. It felt like the veganism was coming into the mainstream in Miami, we were very behind LA at least, and New York in terms of vegan options. But I found that the restaurants, they started to offer some vegan options finally. And I feel like it just was the time to create a brand. And I thought, well, how can I bring veganism into the mainstream? What is the top selling point? And I live in Miami, so sexy and fit.
Yeah.
Let's attach that to vegan, sexy, fit, vegan. And the brand was born. And I thought, I thought that, sorry, I lost my train of thought again.
That's okay. So you said you're building Sexy Fit Vegan because that's what was popular in Miami. And so you're trying to have impact, and 2013 was the pivotal point.
Yes. So it just felt like the right time. And so I went for it. And I was surprised at how receptive it actually was. And there were a lot of people who said, are you sure you don't want to, are you sure you want to go with the word vegan?
Yeah.
Are you sure you don't want to do with plant-based? Like that would be much more inviting. That might be more mainstream. And at that time, I said, absolutely not. I said, I've been vegan for, 20 years now. And I know what people think about what it means to be vegan. I know what they typically picture in their head when they picture a vegan. And I am not any of that. And I want to represent what vegan means in a new light. And so I really want to attach myself and my lifestyle and the Sexy Fit lifestyle to the word vegan as a statement in a sense.
Yeah. And I agree with that. That's kind of why I went the same direction too. So you've been coaching for over a decade now, ultimately. Coaching people to, again, eat vegan and then improve their body composition and transform their health. Is that right?
Yeah. So at first with the Sexy Fit Vegan brand, I created a website. I created a blog. This is back when blogging was just getting out there as something that was popular. So I just started putting information out. I didn't really know the direction I wanted to take. I didn't have a bunch of people lining up for coaching programs yet. So I was still personal training at the time until 2015 rolled around. And at that point, because there were very few brands like mine in 2013, I got a lot of recognition. I got in bodybuilding.com, the world's largest bodybuilding online magazine. I got in Shape magazine. I got approached by a publishing company who wanted to do a book with me. So I really got on a lot of podcasts, and because it was so new. And then I started coaching somebody who just moved to Miami, who looked up vegan trainers on Google, found me, was training her. And she said, Ella, don't you want to make more money? You're not really utilizing all these things that you have. And I was like, well, she's like, you're undercharging too. And I was like, I'm charging you pretty good. It was like a pretty good rate. Yeah. And it turns out she was a business coach. And she said, how would you like to an online coaching program? And I said, absolutely, yes, that sounds amazing. I know I'm not supposed to be personal training as my long-term plan. An online coaching program helping people go vegan, or at least move in the direction of plant-based and get fit and healthy, is perfect. So in 8 weeks, I had a coaching program up and running and had my first group of coaching clients. And at that time, the program really was focused on kind of the nuts and bolts of how to make the transition away from animal products into a healthy vegan lifestyle. That was the main goal of the program, and that's how it was marketed. And it did really well. Yeah,
beautiful. So online is so much better, right? Because you've done personal training. It's those missed training session at 5 a.m. when the client doesn't show up, you're like, oh man, I woke up early for nothing right now. So, and online allows you to have such a greater impact around the world versus the people that just live in Miami, for example, in your case. Like how did that fulfill you in terms of the bigger mission, the fact that you went online, you're able to reach people outside of where you just live?
Yeah, no, this was all in kind of one of the values that I have, which is freedom, right? Freedom to travel, to see the world, to not be in one place. And Miami is fabulous. It's an incredible place to live, and I'm warm year round, so that's a bonus. But I am very adventurous. I'm somebody who wants to see the world. And yes, when you have a job that requires you to be in person, that absolutely is restrictive. And also, a lot of people weren't ready to go the nutrition route. So being able to open the world up online allowed me to reach people all over the world and really find my ideal clients that were people that weren't just interested in just getting fit, but also were ready to do it the compassionate way. And whether they were considering it the compassionate way or not, it is the compassionate way. I meet people with where they are. So if their goal is healthy and fit, that's how we start. Did I throw in all the amazing contributions they were making, even if it was unintended? Absolutely, as part of the programs. They go through a whole course. And what it also allowed me to do was really bring in the mindset piece. I had gotten my master's degree in social work, leaving open the option to become a licensed therapist at some point. Psychology was my minor in college as well, always something that's interested me. So to be able to create this program that people went through that had all the components that would help them create a sustainable change rather than just the temporary change. Let me just work out extra hard. Let me restrict my food. Let me get there and have this change only 6 months later to be right back where I started or worse off was very frustrating, right? As a trainer, that's very frustrating. So to be able to build a program that helped people get sustainable results and to also then get to know these people and realize that they were struggling in some of the same ways I had struggled in my 20s and early 30s with disordered eating, and to start to address that as well. So my program really shifted quite a bit.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful how we build something to help the world and then we kind of realize, like, hey, that's the thing I struggle with. Let me help people that were in my position of what I overcame. So if you're comfortable with it, we can dive into that, because I know that something a lot of people are dealing with, especially nowadays, now that the social image that is put out there and the kind of really rapid marketing of quick fat loss, you have to look this certain way for a wedding, for travel, all that. People are starting to have really unhealthy blueprint to losing the weight, and that can lead to disordered eating. So I'm curious, like what kind of like got you there and how did you get out of it?
Yeah, I'm very open to talking about this. And this is because of the work I've done and the work I now help other people do. In my 20s, and it's something I still kind of go back and look and say, okay, well, what are some of the causes for why this happened? And I think there are multiple. But basically, I got to the point where I put so much pressure on myself. I am a recovering perfectionist. And, I took such a huge responsibility, or I saw myself as having a huge responsibility to the animals. So when I found that having this really strong, lean physique was my tool at that point in time for helping animals. That was my gateway to help animals. It was like, okay, now the pressure's on, because now my worth and my purpose in life is dependent on the shape of my body. So I got very, very strict with my food. It turned into, I also had some body dysmorphia. So I would look in the mirror and see fat that was not there. I would, be counting and restricting and doing everything that I could to create the quote perfect physique that would attract other people to then ask me how I did it, for me to then share my vegan story and help them go plant-based. So there was, I think, a combination of a lot of pressure. Additionally, I made a lot of really poor decisions in my younger years. So I was a dancer, an exotic dancer in college. So when most girls my age were kind of exploring their sexuality and their bodies alongside other people their age, I was dancing. And my excuse at that time was, well, I'm not going to work at a restaurant and serve meat. So what else can I do to bring in some cash to get me through school? And I had a boyfriend who kind of influenced me into moving in that direction. So that really had an impact on my own relationship with my body. And I was just thinking about this the other day, and I've done so much to heal, since then, and we can talk about that. but I was being exploited. I was fighting for animals not to be exploited, and then I was putting myself in a position where I was exploiting myself, basically. And so I had a really poor relationship with my body. I was very disconnected with my body. So I saw it as this kind of tool, like I'm going to use my body to fulfill my life's purpose, but not really being in my body. And that was something that I've had to work really hard at overcoming over the years.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you for sharing that. I just want to point two things out for the people listening. So, and I'm sure you've noticed this with people that are plant-based or vegan, kind of like fanatics, kind of like we are. They're going to prioritize animals, environment, and other things over their own health or mental health, right? If you want to put it that way. And the reality is you can have all three. But when you first start and transition, you don't know that it's a possibility, because I'm sure you know a bunch of people that are vegan for the animals, but they eat the shittiest food ever and they don't take care of themselves.
Yes.
And another point I want to point out too is veganism is such a powerful thing, in that people that are vegan that really believe in wanting to save the animals, the environment, their own health will go above and beyond what anyone else will ever do to get the message across. Like there's no financial gain from like us promoting veganism and wanting to be vegan, especially when you transition, right? Yeah. Like now we have, yes, we do have businesses built around it. I do want to acknowledge that, but it's meant so that we can serve people that were in our position so they can do it faster, better, without all the mistakes, right? So something, that's what it is. But vegans are so intense in wanting to serve the cause and get nothing out of it. You don't see that from people that are in the meat industry that are going to go above and beyond for you to eat a steak. The only people you can think of are like farmers, but farmers is just to make money. If they could make money growing soy, they would. They wouldn't care necessarily if it's meat or it's soy, whatever pays the bills for being a farmer. Yeah. So like there's something about vegans that are just so passionate, they'll go above and beyond to serve the cause, regardless of what it costs. And there's no other paleo, keto, carnivore people that would do that. So I just want to point that out for people listening that are not vegan yet and just trying to understand why vegans are so intense, is because we're just so trying to serve the cause and get nothing out of it besides the benefits of health, saving the animals and the environment.
I think that's such a good point. And it is something that's hard to understand, I think, for a lot of people. And so thank you, everyone listening who's not yet vegan, who's open to hearing and understanding and learning. I think that's really huge. And I think one of the pieces here of this conversation is that we've opened our hearts to this suffering. And there's billions and trillions of animals that are suffering and dying. And when we open our hearts to that, it can be very painful, and something that we don't necessarily have the tools of how to deal with that on a mental and emotional level. Yeah. And so that can circle back into some forms of self, harm, and making choices that are detrimental to our own health on one level or multiple levels. And it's like this pain that we don't know how to necessarily deal with.
Yeah. And how did you manage to kind of deal with that pain, right? Because a lot of people just shut off. That's typically the answer when there's too much pain. We just shut off. We choose to ignore it. It doesn't exist. It's not happening. So how did you deal with that pain, and how did you kind of go through the process of healing through what you went through with disordered eating?
Yeah. So I started learning some self-coaching techniques and getting to the place of practicing being the observer of my own mind, of my own thoughts. I took some courses around that. I had some coaches around that, and starting to kind of detach from this sense of here's who I am, to say, let me be curious. Let me be curious about what's going on, and then let me share. And one of the big pieces of having the coaching programs that I have now is that encouragement for our members to understand that it's a safe space to be vulnerable, because there's a lot of shame involved when there's self-sabotage, when there's disordered eating. It's a shameful place to be. And it's something that I hid for so many years from my best friends, from my family, when I would restrict and basically starve myself and then binge on an entire container of peanut butter in one night. Like, that's embarrassing when you're going through it and you don't know how to stop.
I've been there, so I get it.
Yeah, it's something that you don't want to share. And so when I started coaching myself, when I started understanding that shame lives and thrives in silence, and when I started taking that step back and being the observer and started going through some self-coaching techniques of understanding that our thoughts create our feelings, and that we have the power to change our thoughts. And just because we have a thought doesn't make it true. And starting to really understand all of that and start to work through these things and approach myself with more compassion, and to give myself the grace that I give everyone around me, and certainly animals. And when I started doing that, I decided in 2000, I believe it was 2015, to come out with everything that I'd been going through in a blog post. So, this is not something that, if you are going through something like this, that you need to share with the entire world. Share it in a safe space. Share it with people that you love and trust. I tend to go big in pretty much everything I do in my life. So I decided to share it with the world. And I came out with a series of 5 blog posts, really sharing my story and all the things that I had previously felt really shameful about and had hidden. I just came out with them. And I remember hitting, clicking on publish. I remember that moment and this weight that was lifted off of me. And, there were nerves involved, and, how are people going to react? And are people going to look at me differently and think about me differently? And I said, I don't care. I don't care, not as much as I care about being free from the shame and being free from this disordered eating. And so that was the start of that was kind of the pivotal moment that really shifted how I moved through the world. And it also helped me connect with people, because the response I got was extremely positive, extremely supportive.
Yeah. Was that when you press publish, was that at a time where you had done your healing, or you're still going through your healing process?
Yes, I was largely through my healing process at that time. And I think that's another thing I know there's so many up and coming influencers and leaders in the movement. And so there is, I think, a difference between being vulnerable and sharing things when you're in the middle of it.
Yeah,
versus,
get affected so fast.
Right. And thinking of, okay, what's going to be helpful to my audience? So if it's just for me, then yes, I have my close friends and family that I share things as I'm going through them. But when I'm thinking about how I'm going to be vulnerable and share to my audience and the people I'm coaching and people that I'm here to help, it's not necessarily helpful to them if I haven't figured it out yet. So there's a difference. Yeah. It's not that I'm shameful about it, but it's that I want to release that information when I have something that's going to help benefit other people, not me just dumping my crap on everyone, but saying, here's what I've been through and here's what I've learned from it. Here's what I have to offer to you to maybe you use in the ways that might be helpful to you. So I was, at that kind of end of that. There's never an end, but, on that side of the healing process.
Yeah. And I think that's a big piece for people to take away is, if you're going through something, like what you did is great, seek help. Right. And then you dealt with it and you came out with it, because literally the difference, if you come out early with it, it is dumping your shit on other people. And if you come out with it after you've dealt with it, it's leadership. Right. So literally the timing is important. It changes the word and the value that kind of comes from it.
1,000%.
And so I know that you've kind of helped a lot of people with coaching, with disordered eating, all that. I noticed on your website, you mentioned also like working with patterns. I'm a big fan of the whole psychology component. So what are common patterns that you see in people that you work with, and how do you resolve them? Let's just go with the 3 biggest ones that you notice that the audience would relate to.
Well, I think one of the main places we start in my coaching programs is just how people approach themselves, their self-talk. and what their patterns around self-talk are. And I work mostly with women, and most of their self-talk, I'm like, would you ever speak to any other human, especially somebody you care about, like you speak to yourself? Would you look at them and say, I'm fat, I'm ugly, would you pinch their fat? Like, none of that would happen with somebody you care about. So let's start to first observe and identify the patterns of how you're talking to yourself and start to shift those. And these are things that, we're talking about reprogramming here. We're talking about subconscious programming, which runs the show 95% of the time. These are the programs that we developed often before we were 7 years old, that we're not even aware of. We think they are who we are. We think these thoughts are true. Mm-hmm. We think we know who we are. And they're all things that were programmed into us by society, by our parents, by our teachers, by other people. So the sooner we can start to recognize that pattern of how we talk to ourselves and become the observer, and then start to introduce my favorite mantra to start most people out with is, I approach myself with curiosity and compassion. And we look at the patterns, we look at the, patterns of eating, this snacking, coming home from work, feeling stressed out, going automatically to grab the bag of potato chips or whatever it is out of the cabinet, sit down, watch some Netflix to unwind because you're stressed out. There's another pattern, right? Mm-hmm. What is behind that? And what would you do if you actually loved yourself? What would that look like? Is that pattern a pattern of somebody that loves themselves? Because if we can make conscious choices, if we can learn how to switch into our conscious brain as we change the subconscious programming, then we get to create a new subconscious that's running the show 90 to 95% of the time, that is a healthy pattern, right? So it's that coaching program period of, a few months where it takes a lot of work, it takes a lot of effort, it takes a lot of energy just to keep switching into the conscious mind. That's why we have a subconscious. We can't, it's exhausting to be in your conscious and if we had to do that, we would have to learn how to drive again every time we got in a car. Right. But we kind of get in a car and we don't even think about what we're doing. Thank goodness. So that'd be a lot of energy. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really powerful of the standpoint of being the observer, because we're so good at giving advice to other people, but we suck at giving it to ourselves. Like you said, we're the harshest on ourselves compared to all the people around us. So I think it's a really powerful exercise to people to have that different point of view, ultimately, so they can see the bigger picture versus just a pixel that they see in front of them. What are other patterns that you notice with people? Because you talked about sustainable fat loss, right? People losing the weight for 6 months and then putting it back on 6 months after. So what are common patterns that you see there?
Well, another kind of mindset shift that we work on is people often think that motivation needs to come first and action comes second, right? But what we talk about is, no, action needs to come first a lot of the times. We don't need to wait around for motivation. And we have what we call a self-empowerment coaching system that helps people take a pause before action, to then recognize the thoughts that are creating the feelings that you're having. And then knowing that we can now create intentional thoughts that'll create intentional actions. Motivation is not in the self-empowerment coaching system, right?
Yeah.
It's all about intention. So when we get in this pattern of thinking, I need to feel motivated in order to act, that needs to switch right away, to get to a place where we're saying, no, let me pause. Let me think about, okay, how am I feeling? I'm feeling unmotivated. I'm feeling sad. What am I feeling? What thoughts are creating those feelings? And there's always a core belief about, and then we start to observe, like, what's that core belief that is keeping me from taking action in the direction of my best self, in the direction of my goals, in the direction of getting to a place where I've lost the body fat I need to lose to feel comfortable in my own skin, to feel active, to feel energized, to feel healthy, to be healthy. What is that vision of I have for my life, and why are my actions not aligning with that vision? Let's get intentional. And it all comes from the power of our thoughts. And we have power over our thoughts. We just don't know it most of the time.
isn't that interesting how I'm sure you've noticed this as well, how people treat health and fitness and exercising and taking care of themselves as if it's a completely different thing than every other aspect of their life. Because if you think
Right.
of just showing up when you're motivated, think of showing up as a mom when you're just motivated. I don't think it's going to work great. Just think of
Mhm.
just showing up for your job when you're motivated. I don't think you're going to have a job for a very long time. Think of just showing up for your relationship when you're motivated. You're not going to have a great relationship. And so it's so interesting that we as a human approach this area so differently because we know that if we
Mhm.
study, we can pass the exam, we can graduate. So it's just about showing up in that area. Same thing for health and fitness, right?
Mhm.
We just approach it in such a different way, which is so interesting to me. Do you identify like why do you think that is that people approach this area of life completely differently than all the other areas, which already have the tools necessary to succeed in this area, but it just they don't translate it to this one.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. I think part of it comes from this place of where we're not connected to love for ourselves, that unconditional love for ourselves. I think that leads to the self-sabotage. Also, when it comes to and nutrition is the toughest of the two, in my opinion, with exercise. Exercise, you need to be active and get yourself going for an hour a day. Food, that temptation of eating crap and what's convenient is there 24/7. So that's a tough one. There's social factors involved. Like this is not an easy shift. And um, when it comes to training towards your goals, this is something that you don't see the results right away. And
Yeah.
especially now, we're in this culture of needing things to happen so quickly, right? We need to get
Yeah.
everything in sound bites. We need to see the results right away. We need to get a like on Instagram. When these are our motivations, then that doesn't set you up to create a way of life that is conducive to really what most people do want. People want to live long, healthy lives.
Yeah. Delayed gratification is the thing that we suck at
Yeah.
ultimately. Yeah. Because, yeah, so Amazon Prime screwed it up for all of us. It was like, oh, I can get this new thing that I want now and I don't have to leave my house. Um, yeah, it's the world, definitely the world as it shifted just from like 2000 to 2010 to now, everything has gotten faster, quicker. You can just consume more so much more easily. And I think, yeah, it is affecting people's psychology in terms of like learning to be patient, delaying gratification. And I think that's why more people are, again, putting on more weight than ever. People are getting more in debt than ever. People are putting themselves in worse positions than ever because it's just that instant kick and hit of like, now I want to feel good now. I can't afford to wait 4 months, 6 months to look the way that I want to, right? It has to happen now.
Right. And then when we go for those quick fixes, they're not sustainable. The changes, the way people are getting there, extra 2 hours of training so hard every day and the restricting the eating and listening to the diets out there with, no carbs, you're walking around hungry. Like none of that is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
None of that is sustainable. So when you're getting to the goal in unsustainable ways, then you're left with an unsustainable routine. So of course you're going to fall back into the patterns that you know. So we really look at how can we create new patterns and how can we really focus on a different why. So I have people in my coaching programs and in my 22 Reboot program not focus on the weight loss. I'm like, how's that been working for you all these years? When you're focused on the weight loss, that's my goal. I don't have people measure themselves in my program. I don't have people weigh themselves in my program. And yet they lose the weight and keep it off because we look at the bigger picture. We look at the why, and then we focus on the present moment. We focus on the steps that they're taking each day to create new habits, to build a new way of moving through the world. And that starts in our mind. That absolutely involves our emotions. And when we can take that power back, take it away from the food, put it in our own hands, put it in our own thoughts, then we can set ourselves up for success that way. And the mindfulness piece of that is so important.
Yeah, it sounds like a detoxification from the fitness world ultimately, right? We talked about basically a dopamine hit when you get the food and you watch the phone and you get the like. Basically, it's the addiction model. Ultimately, when you
Yes.
look at it, we're all addicted to like feeling good now, today. And then we don't have the ability. And then when you think of the addiction model, so like they cut you out of all of it so that you can learn to operate without it. But we don't think that it's a possibility sometimes. So that's why I like kind of what you're doing with the detoxification kind of process of removing all these things, of just focusing on like, how do you feel?
Yes. And also, it's a building a relationship, a new relationship with our bodies and with food and with exercise. We're working out because we love our bodies, not because we hate them. We are eating as a form of self-care. So eating that, kale salad over the, French fries, we're doing that out of love, not because it's a restriction, but it's going to make me feel good. It's going to give me energy. Oh, my body's going to feel like so grateful to me. Wow. This is a form of self-care. It's building a new relationship with food, and that I'm going to sit here and actually look at my food. I'm going to experience my food. I'm going to say, wow, how beautiful is this colorful bowl that I have right now with the tomatoes and the arugula and the avocado. And how does that feel going into my mouth? And I'm going to chew my food to a paste. I'm not going to be watching TV while I'm doing it. I'm going to feel how it feels in my mouth. I'm going to swallow. I'm going to notice my body, how it's feeling. I'm going to notice when my body starts to feel full, so that I can stop when I'm about 80% full, so that I don't overfill myself, so I don't eat more than my body needs. How can I use food as a form of self-care, as a fuel for my body?
Yeah, and that's beautiful. Basically bringing presence to it. And again, we live in such a busy world of like, well, I'm going to work and let me just kind of eat my food throughout it. And you're numb to the whole thing.
Yes.
Or we try to make fast decision the easiest decision. You ever heard that? Like, oh, I went to the restaurant, I ordered the easiest thing, and it was like the burger with the fries. I'm like, well, the Buddha bowl was right beside it, and it was literally the same amount of letters you had to say, right? Same amount of words, but it's the easiest because it's the thing that
Right.
you want. We're very interesting. So Al, I want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to jump on the podcast. One thing I want to acknowledge you for, right? So I appreciate you being vulnerable and sharing your story, but I also appreciate you for jumping on the podcast. And here's why. A lot of coaches won't jump on other people's coaching, like on other people's podcasts have coaching programs. And I think there's a fear of like, well, they might get clients from me if I go on their show, and kind of like vice versa. At the end of the day, that's my opinion. That's why there's a lot of people that don't come on my show for that specific reason. They're like, well, what if this happens? I'm like, dude, we're on the same mission. We're trying to help people eat plant-based. We're trying to help them save the animal, disease-proof their body, and save the environment. And for the people listening, again, I am fully aware of everything that I do. If what Ella shared with you connects with you, go on Ella's website. Go work with her. Don't come and work with me, right? I'm a different personality. I do things differently, and that's just who I am. And Ella is who she is. So if you connect with Ella, go on her website, work with her, right? I'm more than happy. All I want is for more people to disease-proof their body. For me, it's a health standpoint of why I originally transitioned, kind of like we talked on your show. But work with Ella if you connect with her, right? So I always want to be upfront and transparent. So I acknowledge you for jumping on the show and for having me on your show, because not every other coach is willing to do that.
Well, I really appreciate that, Maxime. And I agree. This is, if we're coming from a space of abundance, I mean, there's so many people out there, and we're mission-driven people. And the mission is way outside ourselves. And it's outside my business. It's outside your business. This is about making this world a healthier, more compassionate place for all beings. And you do that amazingly. I do that. And there's plenty of people out there who need our help. So I'm all about promoting everyone's work and having people connect and find the coach that really resonates best with them. So thank you for this opportunity. Thanks for chatting with me, and I really appreciate what you do.
You're welcome. And so for everyone listening, I have all of Ella's link down below for her podcast, Instagram, website, everything down below. Go check out. She has amazing content. I want to say massive thank you to everyone for listening, and we will see you all in the next episode. And Ella, thank you very much once again.
Thanks, Maxime.